Why are people so mean?
This fandom, I mean,
It's amazing how correct we were 3 years ago.
back in 2015, we had this to say about Star Wars fandom. I've had a premonition. And that premonition is there is a war brewing on the horizon. And what I mean is that it is a war between Star Wars fans. And I really think that point is here now.
Some may even say that we passed that point a little while ago and it's even worse. But
It's even worse now. It really began with the release with The Last Jedi, and now it's just, I think we're in the middle of a Star Wars gate.
It's depressing. It's really depressing at this one. There are fans that are taking glee at Solo underperforming at the box office. There are fans that are actively sharing stuff around, trying to say that Kathleen Kennedy might step down from Lucasfilm or get fired from Lucasfilm. You've got people. I mean, of course, we're going to talk about the big controversies that have been going on in the Star Wars fandom recently here on this video in regards to both Chuck Wendig and Kelly Marie Tran.
Chuck Wendig, for those of you who don't know, he wrote the Aftermath trilogy of Star Wars novels taking place after Return of the Jedi. And he posted recently, "Help, I fell down a weird rabbit hole of Star Wars fans. Oh my god, these people. Here's what happened for context. Some numbnuts tagged me into something about boycotting my upcoming Darth Vader annual issue out in August, and there I saw some shit. The current idea is that Solo is quote-unquote tanking, I guess by having the 4th biggest opening in 2018 so far, because of super fans who so hated The Last Jedi so bad that their magic hate powers caused a sorceress boycott of Solo. And that's astonishingly goofy on so many levels. First, that fans, again, fans are happy. Happy that Star Wars is faring poorly. It's like rooting for your own child to fail. It's like hoping your own puppy falls down some steps. It's so weird. Second, that people hated The Last Jedi enough to affect Solo's numbers, but somehow not enough to affect The Last Jedi's numbers? Like, with The Last Jedi, what, people kept tonguing that broken tooth? Feeding money into the movie machine to hope it would get better, and then bought the Blu-ray? And if you fall deep enough down the rabbit hole, it gets extra weird. First, they hated The Force Awakens because something social justice warriors, J.J. Abrams, identity politics, A New Hope rehash, whatever. Then they hated The Last Jedi because it ruined The Force Awakens. And now they're happy Solo is underperforming, and they're claiming it as a success in this weird ideological culture war they're waging. Solo arguably is underperforming, and to claim that their little fan campaigns had anything to do with that is so bizarre and narcissistic, you might as well claim it's because you did a fucking magic I hate Star Wars tap dance in your man cave. It's never because of hater fans. A movie also never succeeds because of its fans, because most moviegoers, the ones who form the bulk of the movie-going public, the ones who buy most of the tickets, don't give a great honking shit about most of this stuff. Trevorrow was fired from Episode 9, so their thing is, put all our energy into Jurassic World 2 and make it a success, and that'll show Star Wars, the thing we supposedly love but actually really hate. I mean, you might as well support oxygen. Everybody's breathing it. We won! Jurassic World 2 ain't gonna have any problems at the box office. If you really want to prove your power, see if you can get the Book of Henry to the top of the Blu-ray charts or some shit. Thing is, I still remember this from Aftermath. All the review bombing, all the conspiracy theories about how the book was secretly failing. I'd get emails telling me, ha ha ha, your book isn't even on bookshelves. Never mind that there are lots of reasons books don't land on bookshelves, one of them being, well, the book sold out. I mean, 2 years after the book came out, Aftermath still sells several hundred copies a week. I also heard, it did so poorly they'll never hire Chuck Wendig again. And then I got 2 more books and a comic, and then I was in FactPov, and then I got another comic, and yeah. And of course you wonder how this even continues or why, and those answers are both complex and simple. First, some people have monetized it, or want to. YouTube channels that financially channel people's dipshit rage. Second, bots or fake accounts. Given that some of these accounts are literally nothing but this, or are this, and Trumpy shit-stained stuff, you kinda see what's up. Third, it's what's at the heart of this weaponized, aerosolized horse shit. It's sexism and racism. It's sphincter-stung white dudes who are so tender, so brittle, they cannot hack that world, is only 90% about them instead of 95%. Their names change. MRA, Incel, Gamergate, Comicsgate, Sad Puppies, real Star Wars fans. But at the heart of it is the same fragile rage born of the poisonous chemical combination of white supremacy and toxic masculinity. This is the huge cultural knot that led to the current fucked up moment in American and world history, and it's going to take time and effort to untie it and or chop through it. It's the same shit. It's the same tiny hearts nested in massive inflated egos who fear that the world is not uniquely theirs and that they might actually have to share it with other people and, oh no, not get by on mediocrity alone. The reason they hate identity politics is that it involves politics that do not perfectly invoke their singular identity. At the heart of it, these people aren't fans and they can't see through the particulate fog of their own expulsions to see what they really are. And you know, I gotta agree with the guy. But then some guys that we've followed for a long time now, Jimmy Mack and Jason Swank at Rebel Force Radio, had to open their mouths in response to this.
It was really surprising when I saw this. I did not see the full thread that Wendig had written ahead of time, but when I saw the response, I'm sitting there just going, "What are you guys doing?" Because they basically said that
they said, and pause a moment.
No, you can bring it up. You can let it run. Damn it.
We spend a lot of time talking about what is broken within Star Wars on our latest show. A big problem is how the creators publicly attack the fans. Take Star Wars author Chuck Wendig, for example. These Star Wars fans? Great PR, Chuck.
Seriously?
They basically go on to pretty much say, the customer is always right. We are paying customers, so you need to show us respect. So,
wow.
What about the customer showing the creatives respect?
See, this is something that I feel like that has been brewing. Let's take this away from Star Wars for a moment. Let's take this because this was actually something that they brought up on what was it? The Hyper Show by.
Steelcast?
By Steelcast, thank you.
Right, he had Alex and Molly from Star Wars Explained on their show, and they were discussing this whole situation.
One of the best examples that I can see with that is how they say that that's the equivalent of that what Jimmy said, because they kept talking about Jimmy in that podcast.
Because he does the Twitter account.
Okay, fair point on that. So we don't know what Jason's point is in this whole thing, although
I'm pretty sure he's on the same side.
Yeah, although hearing some of the responses to their most recent podcast, which approached this debate, yeah, pretty much it sounded like that they were pretty much on the same side, which is definitely disappointing. But what they said was, well, one of them, I don't know if it was the Steelcast guy or
Steel Wars,
Steel Wars or the
Star Wars Explained.
Or the Star Wars Explained guys that say it, but it's sort of the equivalent of they're basically saying, you know what, let's just, in the retail business of someone pitching enough of a fit to management, but yet management still acquiesces to them and sells it to them for a reduced price. Instead of basically saying, no, these are our policies, we're going to hold firm for them, because they're so afraid of getting negative PR or negative reviews on Yelp. I mean, and I have at least a manner of saying this. I've worked in retail pretty much my entire adult life, and I've seen this firsthand. When I worked at GameStop, we were very hard line. We did not do stuff like that.
And
but ever since I started working at both Modell's and Dick's Sporting Goods, well, we're very much trying to.
It didn't at Dick's. Didn't you get some nasty phone calls when they announced that they would no longer be selling guns?
Well, again, let's remind the policy was they were starting to say that all gun sale purchases, regardless of weapons, were going to be 21 and over, and they were going to stop stocking the AR style weapons. Right. But no, you're 100% right that was the case of what we got. But we also got a lot of calls in support of that. And if you haven't heard the financial news recently, apparently Dick's has actually had a nice uptick in sales as of late, which definitely helps.
But this whole notion that always treat the customer with respect, not if the customer is being an asshole.
If they're being unreasonable, if they're basically being a bad actor, and I've been saying this a lot over Facebook, why should we placate the assholes and bad actors that are out there in this fandom? Because I can only see that working in one direction, and it's not a good direction. You want to start making your stuff more like, say, I don't know, the DC Extended Universe? Because that's kind of how you start getting stuff like the DC Extended Universe.
Let me get my train of thought here.
Hey, this is a heavy issue, so...
I mean, people pushed Wendig's buttons, and he should be allowed to push back.
It's not, and you know what? If this had been an isolated incident, if this had been like the first time that he had done something like this, I'd probably be more on the side of Jason and Jimmy than I would be on Chuck's. Because hey, one time you do that, and then and you kind of do that, you do kind of have to think that, yeah, maybe you could have phrased it better. But Chuck Wendig has been a victim of this kind of assault and harassment.
And not the only victim, which brings us to...
Well, again, let me finish the point. Pretty much ever since Aftermath came out, I mean, the EU fanboys out there, does that ring a bell? And as I was about to say, you were the one who was about to bring it up. Go right on ahead.
Yes, it brings us to the other unfortunate news that broke this past week was Kelly Marie Tran, the actress who plays Rose Tico in the sequel trilogy, removing her Instagram in response to, or allegedly in response to, lots of harassment, people saying racist stuff and just insulting her and...
I mean, the most insulting thing that I've been seeing on various Facebook groups ever since Last Jedi came out have been the comparisons of Rose to Jar Jar.
Oh my god! And people were saying the same thing about Finn when The Force Awakens came out.
It just is ridiculous. I just sit there and I look at that. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, I mean, you have a problem with a female character who's a little bit of a who's trying to deal with who has reasons for the reasons that she has for being in the dang resistance.
They hate her ideologies that corporations are bad and we should save people by not fighting, blah blah blah.
Which I don't think that was the point of that line. Let's be reasonable here, but it's like, why on earth is it like? I mean, okay. Is it because is it? Pardon me for saying this. is it because she's not hot enough for you assholes out there? I mean...
Now, let's make a point up front that we, and I don't think anybody in Lucasfilm has ever implied that anybody that doesn't like their direction with Star Wars is a sexist or a racist or any of that stuff. They are calling out a specific faction of these people
Amen.
That make clear that they are sexist and racist. If you don't like The Last Jedi for legitimate reasons...
And there can be plenty of reasons for you to not like The Last Jedi, though we fall in the camp of we absolutely love that.
We'll probably argue with you on it, but we won't call you a sexist or a racist unless it's clear that you are.
Bingo.
But we and Lucasfilm are not talking about you guys. If you just don't like the film because of story or direction or whatever, then that's fine.
And I think I think that's also part of the problem, because it also kind of reminds me of something like, say, with Gamergate a few years ago. The side on Gamergate was always the kind of thing, it was always sort of like, this is all about, ethics in games journalism. And at that point, there had been some sketchy things that had been coming out about, folks being, folks from the games journalism industry going and working in games PR from that point. Kind of these wheeling and dealing these backhaul things for access and everything like that. A lot of that stuff was legit and was something that could have been talked about. And I think that even folks like Jim Sterling and the recently
deceased Total Biscuit
John Bain were 100% on board with. They said, why don't we talk about the ethics of this whole thing instead of talking about how what's her name? I'm trying to.
Zoe Quinn?
She's
Sarkeesian?
Thank you. Yes, Quinn was one of them. Sarkeesian was definitely another. Not to say that those two were blameless in some of the things that they said and did, but they certainly didn't deserve.
Both parties had lots of blame.
Absolutely, but at the same time, it stopped being about ethics, and it continued to be about harassment, especially after certain people got angry at certain things. And I'm already seeing. You want a perfect example of how some of this is going on? They recently announced Dead or Alive 6. And one thing that is very apparent, the Dead or Alive series is known for its
fan service,
to be sure. They're taking a very much more conservative approach with the female characters in this. Like Kasumi in the DO6 reveal trailer isn't wearing her traditional blue and white karate outfit. She's wearing much more of a full body ninja suit. And kind of similar to what Ayame is wearing in the more recent games herself. So, and I checked. Sure enough, I checked the comments section, and while there was a lot of positivity in there about the change in direction, there's certainly a lot of comments wondering, what happened to the jiggle physics. I mean, it's really just kind of absurd that this
because jiggle physics make a game.
There you go. But no, it's certainly something that we've noticed that no one in this whole thing wants to. I don't think that I think that there are plenty of people out there that look at this, and they are probably the majority of people. They look at situations like the Wendig situation, and with Kelly Marie Tran, and even with Daisy Ridley, because she's not unaffected by this. She was taken off first.
She was taken off of Instagram a year or two ago because she was voicing for some support for gun control, and people were all, stop talking about politics and just make damn movies! You stupid blankety blank! Oh.
And it is, it's just frustrating that this is something that has continued to happen, and we've even seen it, happen as time has gone on. Like we've been seeing in the last few months with, say, Comicsgate. The stupid shit that's been going on in that world. Because I always said Gamergate always at least had the veneer of talking about the ethics of the journalism in that industry, which was something that definitely needed to be talked about at that point. Comicsgate, that's straight up harassment.
Yep.
I mean, that's straight up going after Marvel and trying to take any kind of joy in their failures at their character initiatives with folks like with characters like Gwenpool, Spider-Gwen, the female Captain America,
Miles Morales.
Well, no. Well, Miles Morales existed long before this, so he's kind of unaffected by this. I know that there's probably still some of that, but he existed well before this.
Yeah, but I have seen people give him flack just for existing.
Now that is probably part of it, but again, I'm talking about more of the characters that have been created sort of like in the last 3 years or so that Marvel did. But it's
Amazingly Awesome Hulk.
Something like the Korean Hulk. The pregnant Spider-Woman.
Pregnant Spider-Woman?
There was a storyline where she was pregnant for a while. And then of course, should we also talk about Carol Danvers now becoming the official Captain Marvel? But then again, she's about to completely smash through that here in a few months, so I don't think we need to worry so much about that. But back on track for this, it's honestly just it's disappointing. It's surprising and it's disappointing that this has so much to do. It feels like, and this has so much to do just with the fact that people are taking joy in kicking Disney.
I mean,
they're trying to find anything that they want as say, oh, look at that, there's a negative. I mean, part of that is because that you're the top dog right now.
It's these truthers that you see all over YouTube now.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, oh God, like I watched one Star Wars video, and then all of a sudden I go back to my recommendeds of like a day or two later, I'm seeing shit from world-class bullshitters and what's another one?
Geeks and Gamers.
Geeks and Gamers. God forbid if I ever wind up with stuff from Diversity in Comics on my recommendeds. Like first off, that's part of the problem as well. YouTube's algorithms have completely f***ed that whole thing up, plain and simple. Like there's a lot of crap that people have been criticizing YouTube heavily of in recent months. Oh, and I think that's one of them.
Jar Jar Abrams.
God, yeah. Like, what? Really? It's absurd for me to think about that because we're at this point now where, I mean, we always talked about fan entitlement. Like,
oh, yeah.
We really felt like that even before Disney, like we've been doing videos on this stuff now for almost 7 years. And one of the very first things that we talked about in regards to the Blu-rays was how the fans felt so entitled to Star Wars. And we're getting even more and more of that. It's that same fan entitlement that drove George to sell to Disney. Like, do you think George Lucas probably would have wanted to finish the series 7, 8, 9.
If not for the fans.
If not for the fact that he was getting completely blasted at every single turn and being treated as... I mean, forgive me for saying this, people treated him badly, but yet they would not say the same thing about Roman Polanski, a convicted rapist and arguably, or not, a pedophile.
Convicted?
Well,
unknown.
Actually, I think he was convicted. He just fled the country. And that's one of the reasons why. But, they still gave, Academy still gave him an Oscar for The Pianist in 2001, for Christ's sakes. But another topic for another time. I mean, when you're being treated as that just because that people didn't like People didn't like Jar Jar Binks, Hayden Christensen, and whatever.
Jake Lloyd.
And Jake Lloyd, I mean, God bless it. You want to talk, I mean...
I couldn't believe some of the things they wrote about the prequels, you know? I mean, but really, beyond, I didn't like it. You ruined my childhood, and I'm still angry about the way they treated Jake Lloyd. He was only 10 years old, that boy, and he did exactly what George wanted him to do. Believe me, I understand clunky dialogue.
I mean, if there's if there's two guys that I want to see turn up in episode 9, it's Hayden and Jake. I want those guys.
Hayden and Jake?
I mean, they don't have to be the same character. You could get Jake to maybe play, you could get Jake maybe to do something like, be like an extra somewhere. Just give those guys a sense of closure after all this time. Like, I mean, Hayden especially, I think, deserves it probably the most because, you know, a young guy on the rise at that time, and pretty much right after that, he struggles to find any kind of work, and that's sad.
And you know, the amount of vitriol thrown at Star Wars recently posted a tweet celebrating Kathleen Kennedy's birthday. And they had to take it down because people were sending her death threats and calling her, oh my God.
It's just, and, okay. All right, we brought up Rebel Force Radio near the top of this whole thing. And I think one of the reasons why we are so baffled and confused by what they had to say is that the whole reason we kind of latched onto them is because they seemed like those kinds of folks who hated the type of fans that we hated. The best example of this would be their hatred, or at least Jimmy's hatred, of Simon Pegg.
Let's look at some quotes from Simon Pegg's past if you don't think that he's a hypocrite. Let's look at this. This is Pegg the Liar. He was quoted as saying this, word for word. Being a geek is all about being honest about what you enjoy and not being afraid to demonstrate that affection. It means never having to play it cool about how much you like something. So should we amend that quote, Pegg, and say, unless, of course, you like the Star Wars prequels? Let's take a look at this quote. Pegg the Opportunist. If one of your best friends is making a Star Wars movie, you're not going to not abuse that privilege. I defy anyone to say otherwise. So Pegg is basically admitting the only reason he's allowed to work on Star Wars is because one of his best friends is working on Star Wars. Well, good for you, Simon. Now you got your in, okay? So now you're working on the thing that you've been crapping on for the last 2 decades. Simon says to the New York Times, I don't really have any respect for anyone who thinks those films are good. They're not, he told the News. They're a monumental misunderstanding of what the original 3 films are all about. It's an exercise in utter infanticide.
Do you know what infanticide is?
It's like killing your baby.
It's the murder of an infant. Listen. I mean, there's hyperbole and there's rhetoric, and then there's just irresponsible, inflammatory BS like this.
I don't have time for that. I want to take something positive out of my fandom, or else I'm not going to spend time doing it and calling myself a fan. And if you're going to act that way, then you shouldn't either. You know what? I don't want to hear about it anymore. I just don't want to hear about it anymore. I want to take something positive out of my fandom, and I suggest you do the same. See, this is just very typical of the stuff you see online.
Well, he's projecting it on me. You know, he's projecting his hatred on me. Like, come on, I think it's crap. You have to think it's crap. Come on, join me.
And then there are people who feel the need to control us too, you know? How could you not see it my way?
Yeah.
I mean, does that not sound familiar to what we're trying to say right here? And yet, when Chuck Wendig decides to go against the fans that have been basically harassing him for 3 years now. All of a sudden, that's off limits?
Oh, because he's worked for Lucasfilm. Well, now Simon Pegg has worked for Lucasfilm.
Well, he worked for Lucasfilm even before that. Let's remember that.
That's right. He was on Clone Wars.
So it's absolutely frustrating that they are taking this side right here, because part of it is that we always saw them as folks that understood that this was a saga, and that say everything that you want about the prequels, there's still movies that are worthy to be talked about.
I mean, people do still talk about them positively now. There are positive prequel discussions now, and the harassment continues with Rian Johnson. You know, he can be doing something as simple as just wishing condolences for someone who had died, and people come onto the message and say, "Your movie sucked!"
I mean, and there was a really great point to this whole thing that I think that they said on Steel Wars about how folks act on the internet. There's basically like two generations
of internet users. The people that grew up with the internet, and those
who have been born without knowing a world without it.
People of our generation.
Well, we technically still go with that first generation.
No, the internet started becoming a thing in the mid-90s.
Well, yeah,
I was in middle school at the time.
That's fair, but I'm talking about when it's talking about people that don't know life without it. I'm talking about people born and they don't, and the internet was still a thing.
Yeah, that's me.
I honestly think my brother, who is about a decade younger than I am, is closer to that generation than either of us. At least that's my opinion, because that's what it seems to me.
I think we've gotten the two crossed up. There's the ones who were born with the internet around, and those who were born without it around.
Okay.
And I'm of the latter, because I was in middle school when the internet started becoming a thing.
I think we may have crossed our wires there a little bit.
Yes.
But no, that's fine. But the point still stands, is that the ones that adopted the internet adopted it as this place where it was an escape. It's
a fantasy land.
Yeah, a fantasy land. You could go off on it and you could just do whatever the heck you want, say whatever the heck you want. It doesn't even matter what you say, because no one on the other side is real. It's all just this big fantasy.
No one's ever gonna know you. Blah 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 blah.
And then, well, things kind of changed, and now we're at this point.
We're now in the social media age, where people aren't as anonymous as they used to be. And
unfortunately, because so many of these places that have these comment sections, they still have it operating essentially on early adopter rules, where you don't need to put your name on that, and you can just see just so much just terrible stuff. Like, well, there's been a viral video floating around, specifically today as we record this, of a high school baseball championship. I'm not sure which state, but it's a high school baseball championship where the pitcher strikes out the batter for the final out. The pitcher and batter have been friends since childhood, known each other pretty much their entire lives. And when he gets the strikeout, instead of the pitcher going and celebrating with his team, he goes over to his friend and gives him a hug, consoling him for the final out before he goes to join his team for the celebration. Great sportsmanship as far as I'm concerned. But I take a look at the Sports Center tweet for it. I already see so many people saying, "Oh, if I had been coach, I would have made that kid run about 100 laps for doing something shitty like that." I'm like, are you fucking real here? Like, it's just like, just a lack of humanity, and just a lack of humanity and compassion that we just revel in, it feels like, these days. And that's one of the reasons why it feels like that the Star Wars thing is just festered and
completely goes against the whole message of Star Wars.
I mean, that's what baffles me about the whole thing, is that Star Wars has never been shy about its political ideology, even from the very beginning.
The Empire is blatantly Nazis. George Lucas even refers to them as Nazis in the Empire Strikes Back commentary.
We said this in the Solo video that we did. So we're technically treading a little new ground right here, but the point still stands. That it's absolutely frustrating that so many people are just surprised when, oh hey, by the way, we're treating the bad guys like the bad guys. I mean, not to say that there aren't worthy reasons to have reasons to play the Empire in video games. I mean, let's face it, one of the best Star Wars games of all time was the TIE Fighter game on PC back in the 90s. But it's also kind of just still with the veneer of, again, these guys are not the good guys. Look at their ideology. Look at them. Look at how homogenized they are. There are none other creatures in there. It's nothing but humans.
Nothing but human beings. Except for one particular Grand Admiral.
Well, that's true, but at the same time,
he's the exception.
He's the exception. The rule, very much so, is still it's either human or nothing. Let's be honest about that. And you can definitely see the parallels, especially now with the First Order. I mean, the First Order is basically
the neo-Nazis
that turned up to 11, and I think that. Though I will say that if you want a good look at sort of their ideology, I'd say check out Lindsay Ellis's video on that, which, I don't have enough good things to say about Lindsay with the work that she's done over the last few years. She's been fantastic. But it just surprises me so much that now it feels like that so many of the bad actors out there are trying to, they want to try to claim video games. They want to try to claim
define bad actors.
I always look at the bad actors as sort of those asshole videos that we see, like World Class Bullshitters, Diversity in Comics, those kinds of folks. I mean, I don't know if they truly do hold those kind of views, but I honestly have to wonder sometimes if the people that are espousing some of these views even believe in half of the stuff they're saying.
Well, yeah, their thing is that, they feel victimized by Lucasfilm, by Kathleen Kennedy. And, I mean, that's certainly a viewpoint, but, like I said before, if you have legitimate reasons for legitimate critical reasons like storytelling or acting or directing or blah 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 of these new films, that's fine. Feel free to criticize. But Lucasfilm isn't talking about those guys. They're talking about the blatant sexists and racists.
Is it really that much of a surprise that these folks are that they would want to try to go back on them? Because again, Wendig has had that been building up in his system for 3 years now, and the fact that it's only now that he even goes even slightly over the line, arguably, in calling those folks out, I think he deserves to be commended for that. But at the same time, I also look at Rebel Force Radio, who called out asshole fans in the past, like Simon Pegg, and I'm just wondering, what on earth are you guys saying here? Did I believe you guys for no good reason? Because that's part of the reason that I came to you guys in the first place, was because I needed to glom onto a Star Wars podcast that was not hostile towards fans of the prequels.
And all this hostility, wishing that people are fired or wishing deaths upon and blah, 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 and people involved in the movies, this is a big newsflash. This is why George Lucas sold the property in the first place!
Bingo. I don't get why that's so hard for so many of these people to understand. The morons out there like Razor Fist, who are basically cheering every single time a box office return comes in lower than expected, basically saying, oh, you'll be begging for George Lucas. Motherfucker, motherfucker, you're probably one of those assholes who rode George Lucas off the project to begin with.
Razor Fist has said he liked the prequels.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's just like the way that he's been acting about it lately.
Oh my God.
Ugh.
This is why he didn't want to do anymore, because he knew this would happen.
I don't think he knew that the way that it was going to happen was going to happen.
But he knew that people would be complaining regardless.
It's just frustrating on this whole thing that this is where, I mean, yeah, George probably knew that people were going to complain about this, but I don't think that he could have envisioned what has transpired over the past 6 months. Like, that's really...
Like, his own daughter had to call out people that were saying bad stuff about him on Twitter. And eventually she even left Twitter.
Hey, as long as we're talking about Twitter and fan reaction, Katie Lucas on August 31st tweeted, "If you're going to tweet hateful words about my father, you will be reported for abuse and blocked." So that kind of sucks, you know. They're like coming after her now.
Oh, for God's sake.
But, you know, it's probably something she's had to deal with all of her life. But I like that she just doesn't, you know, roll over and not say anything about it. You know, she's a person too. So, you know, respect.
We got to start being better about these kinds of things. It's not that hard to remember that, hey, there's someone on the other side of there's someone on the other side of those monitors that you send these messages to.
Words hurt. The whole sticks and stones thing is bullshit.
The whole don't feed the trolls thing, that's bullshit. It's high time those people get called out, that those people are run off of these forums, run off of these groups. If these groups are popping up on Facebook, they deserve to be shut the fuck down. Much the same way as that moron who proudly posted on the EU page that he was glad that Kelly Marie Tran took her page down.
It wasn't the EU page, but you know he tries to associate himself with EU pages, and they're like, we want nothing to do with this guy. It's the down with Disney and their treatment of Star Wars fans.
Which,
blah, 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 blah.
which I should point out did get deleted.
Did it get deleted recently?
Yes, it did. So there's at least a victory there. But again, that happened probably a good 6 months too late. But then again, I say that. But if it wasn't that page, it would have probably been another. Let's be honest about that.
And you know he's just gonna start it up again.
Well, keep an eye out. We stay vigilant. We call it out when we see it.
And you know there are anti-Disney people who say that, you know, I've never seen any harassment thrown around. I've never seen any racism and sexism and that. I just don't like the film for whatever reasons. This page existed. People vandalized Kelly Marie Tran's Wikipedia page. These people do exist. I have seen them. I see them almost every fucking day on social media.
It just needs Now, the good news about
there's someone who made a fan edit of The Last Jedi that cut out all the women.
And how long was that fan edit?
45 minutes.
Yeah. Good fucking movie, am I right?
Oh my God.
No, let's at least bring this back here to at least, you know, turn things around. Some good news.
So the problem is these people exist and they're making themselves known.
No, you're right, but let's pump the brakes a little bit here. Let's turn things around. These people exist. You know who exists probably in a 10-to-1 ratio of them? Good Star Wars fans. Celebration for Chicago next year is already selling at great numbers, probably more than even beating expectations for some folks.
When will they ever do Celebration in DC?
I know. I was kind of hoping for that as well. They could easily put that thing out at the convention center, but you know, you're not that far away in Chicago. A train ride isn't exactly too much of a deal breaker, but. Still, probably not a lot of time to get the logistics on that around, unfortunately.
People like Star Wars Explained and Hello Greedo and Steel Wars. Those are great Star Wars fans.
And if I could bring something up, because you bring up Hello Greedo, he has the perfect counter to why we should be ignoring these kinds of fans. Because he basically says is that why should we be listening to the people who aren't working professionally in this field? I mean, why should it be up to them how to dictate Star Wars? The moment that we start letting those motherfuckers dictate Star Wars, that's going to be the moment where this entire franchise tips over the edge and just becomes...
Because that's something that that I think I've said since these new films were announced, is that no matter what Lucasfilm puts out, there's always going to be people that believe that they could do a better Star Wars movie than the people at Lucasfilm.
I mean, they've believed it since 1999, so who are we supposed to say? Because we're not the ones complaining about that. I don't know. It's just, at this point, it's like we should not be beholden to those folks. And I think that, look, say what you want about the box office of Solo. Yes, it's a disappointment. You don't need to change your entire strategy on a whim just because one movie underperformed, especially when you had 3 other movies basically in rapid succession.
It's not one strike, you're out.
Exactly. I mean, did you not see how much money Black Panther made? Do you forget how much money Infinity War completely did things? I mean, The Incredibles 2 is coming out this week. That's probably going to do a good size of business for them. What else have they got coming out? They've got the freaking they got the Christopher Robin movie coming out later this year. They've got the Mary Poppins Returns as well.
That's I'm iffy on. But
what else? Jeez Almighty! I'm trying to think. What's another movie? What's another movie that I'm thinking?
Wreck-It Ralph 2.
Wreck-It Ralph 2. Yeah. I mean that's probably part of the reason why Disney decided to release Solo when they did, because where else were they going to release it?
I think they released it when they did just because that was part of the original schedule.
Exactly.
And Force Awakens, Rogue One, and Last Jedi all got shifted to December.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I mean, you think of Star Wars, you still think of a May release date, even though those 3 films have all been released in December.
Yeah.
That's still the memories for me going to see the prequels in May, near the end of the school year when they came out. So, but and you just see that. I mean, Disney's not going to be struggling for money just because one movie underperformed. Now, if you have another one of these movies that doesn't do 100% well, maybe that's the time where you kind of have to really start to seriously rethink the strategy. But I've got one good suggestion for this. Let's keep them more or less spaced out. I think maybe the whole argument about Star Wars fatigue might be valid in this case. I think that releasing this, and the marketing did it no favors. We didn't see a trailer for this thing until the Super Bowl.
The marketing was not great for this for Solo.
But I honestly think that you want to do something that you could very easily save a lot of money on. You don't necessarily need to break the bank on. Don't do the Boba Fett movie. Do a Kenobi movie. Keep it, shoot it in.
I still don't understand a Kenobi movie because he's just sitting there in the desert.
There could be something to it, a good character study. I don't know.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now that's the name I've not heard in a long time. Well, except for that one time a few years ago because fans demanded it. But other than that...
Fair point. I think that if you're going to do that, you need to have a movie that's not going to cost over... I mean, let's also remember the production costs were so high because they had to reshoot practically the whole thing. And that didn't help. So do something maybe on a smaller scale, a character movie. I think that starting it the way that they did with Rogue One was a good idea. I definitely think you could do more of these kind of character-based movies, especially if you decide, okay, where do we want to do we want to now do a movie, say, in the gap between episode 6 and episode 7.
If they did, it wouldn't be about the main 3.
There you go. I mean, and it wouldn't have to be, because, pardon me for saying this, you've already got a pretty ready-made story already, based on the ending of Rebels. I mean, I'd go see that movie.
I think a problem with doing a live-action continuation of Rebels is that you would need to find actors that look like Ezra Bridger, that look like Sabine Wren.
And that's kind of the unfortunate. Although, did I ever tell you what my thought was on what they could do with Sabine if they wanted to, say, bring her in for episode 9? I could very easily see Ming-Na Wen from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. playing an older Sabine Wren.
Yeah, I could see that.
Just a little suggestion up top. So I don't know. I mean, she wouldn't be hard to get considering she works for Marvel. So, and of course we've got the other new cartoon that's coming out.
Resistance.
Whenever. Hopefully we'll start seeing some stuff coming out from that in the coming months. Probably at Comic-Con or D23 or whatever the heck's going on this year. But I mean, we just changed the subject on that because, there's a lot of negativity going around. But you know what? This franchise is still good. This franchise still has a lot of good going for it right now. We just now need to be more aware of the folks out there that want to just basically blow this thing up for whatever reason, whether they have an agenda about certain races or sexes or anything, or if they're just angry because Disney. I mean, Disney's already made its Disney. I think has pretty much already made its money back on the sale. When they purchased Lucasfilm in the first place, so there's nothing that says to me that there's right now. I mean that they wouldn't want to give some things another go. Like, let them keep making. If they keep making money, they're going to keep making movies, and I think that's the important thing. Say everything that you want about how some of these movies don't perform. Marvel the success of the Marvel movies is at the very least giving things like A Wrinkle in Time, regardless of what you think of the quality of the film, and I know there's a lot of criticism about it, but the fact that it exists in the first place is an accomplishment in and of itself. And I think that if we keep getting those kinds of successes from Disney, we're going to keep getting more and more of these kinds of kind of strange, but also kind of. I'm not going to say experimental because it would be kind of wrong to classify Disney as that, but just like they're going to be more willing to take chances on maybe properties that have maybe a questionable potential. Just a thought.
So, anything else to say?
We just have to stay vigilant. Stay vigilant. We call this stuff out when we see it, and we just need to not give in.
I mean, again, if you don't like the films for valid reasons, that's perfectly fine.
I got no issue with that myself.
But don't be an asshole about it. Don't go wishing for people to be fired or wishing for deaths, and don't harass people over race and gender and oh my god.
Basic stuff that Mr. Rogers told us about, for crying out loud. Now that's a movie I want to see as well.
I mean, it's like Bill and Ted said.
Be excellent
to each other. I'm just so sick of this toxicity in this fandom.
It's really reaching a breaking point, isn't it? Because let's be fair. I mean, you've been in this longer than I have.
Oh my god.
I mean, I'm staying optimistic about these kinds of things, and I really think that this is a definite speed bump at this moment. But I think that things can get better. I definitely think that the thing that separates, I think, us between a lot of people that we see on the internet, we're optimists. Where everyone else just seems like pessimists.
Reflexive negativity.
Oh my god, the glass is half empty.
Let's take another look at that. I mean, I'm not saying let's do the Mighty Number 9 better than nothing kind of thing right here.
No.
Let's be happy if what we get is genuinely great. I mean, if you don't think it's great, whatever. But if you got also, if you've got basically 8, 9, 10-year-old little kids looking at these things and say, watching, a little 8-year-old Asian girl looking at Rose and saying that I want to be her, or this, 12-year-old kid who looks at Ezra and says yeah, he's the guy I want to be like, or any of the new characters. Why should that be a problem? I mean,
because it's not Luke.
As always,
Luke is the main character.
As always, it's going to be the younger generation that gets us through this. Much the same way it was the younger generation that sort of lit the way during the prequel years, especially near the tail end, when Clone Wars was a big hit on Cartoon Network. So,
I mean, I remember when Clone Wars started, people were calling it the shitty CGI show. And by the time it ended, it's just...
The shitty CGI show, but yet its first episode got over 4 million viewers.
But
something to be said about that.
People love the Clone Wars now. I mean, the perspectives just keep shifting through this franchise.
I think that there are so many folks who maybe look back on some of the stuff they said. Maybe they don't have a different opinion of the prequels themselves, but they also look back upon it and say, you know what, the way that I said it way back then, that was uncalled for. We're not going to get that. We're not going to get that.
People change as they go along. Just like a certain Jedi Grandmaster.
We're not going to get that kind of perspective from a certain group of video creators. Let's be reasonable here. But at the same time, I also think that there are enough people out there that see where this franchise is and where it's going, that we're going to be okay. This franchise is going to be okay. This fandom is going to be okay.
I just remembered another thing that Rebel Force Radio is guilty of, is when Kelly Marie Tran's Wikipedia page was vandalized. They basically accused Brian Young of submitting that and running off to Newsweek of it. Like it was fabricated by Lucasfilm.
Oh boy! I mean, I don't know. I used to really like Rebel Force Radio, and I still do. And I think they get some really good guests that have a lot to know about it. But I'm definitely starting to wonder if maybe it's worth it to stay subscribed to them. And I hate saying that.
I hate saying that too. But ever since Rogue One came out, they've just been. Oh God!
They've gotten, I think, a little too big for their boots as of late.
Do you remember when Rogue One came out?
Yes.
And they called this journalist a social justice warrior regarding the film, and then they had to go back and retract that from their original episode.
Cut it out completely from the episode, so you can't. So you don't even have proof that they even said that.
Like they apologized for it and said that that's not what we want this show to be about, and blah blah.
Well, unfortunately, you've kind of said that with this kind of statement that you're not necessarily not okay with this kind of behavior, guys. And I don't like saying that.
I mean, everything now is social justice warrior this, social justice warrior that.
Which, let's be reasonable about this. There are enough people that take that kind of thing way too far that it is something that deserves to be called out. It's a case of it's definitely not.
But mostly people on Tumblr.
Right. But at the same time, when you see.
But yeah, here's the thing with social justice. I'm perfectly fine with social justice. Representation does matter.
Yes.
But when you're pushing it so hard, mainly for yourself rather than for other people, then you're sort of hurting what you're fighting for.
That's always been let me actually
if a creator puts more women or people of color into their work, That is fine. That is not being a social justice warrior.
That's
but
telling a certain kind of story.
Yes, but if you're demanding that someone put this or that into a story, then you're crossing a bit of a line there.
Like, here's something that I brought up. One of the kinds of things on Tumblr that I had to basically run away from were sort of like these headcanon.
The headcanon people that just want everything their way.
Exactly. It's like headcanons that are kind of like, okay, that are kind of like, one really good headcanon that I remember reading from Sailor Moon is how basically, like, there was a headcanon that Neo Queen Serenity at one point, blessed Ikuko Tsukino, the main mother of the series, basically saying, my daughter is now with you, you take care of her. That's a perfectly reasonable headcanon.
Without her knowing? Like, sort of...
it's been so long I forgot what it was, but it was one that I remember when I read it, basically saying, oh, yeah, I like that. That's good. That's clever and creative. What I don't appreciate are the kind of ones that are saying, say Minako is X or Rei is Y, or is transsexual, is someone who's already transitioned from male to female or anything like that. And it's just like, really? You're going to go ahead and talk about all of that for...
See, that's where we cross the line on social justice.
That's
wanting everything for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and here's something that I've always said, and I think it's still... It may sound rough, but I also still believe it. Representation matters, yes, but good representation matters more. I think that you look at some characters that are outside of the norm, and if they are portrayed even well, like say Toph Beifong from the Avatar series, as a great representation of a. That's the thing that I always look at that. She was a character in the series that at certain points, characters forgot, oh hey, that's right, she's blind. So it's like. It's just like, that's the kind of thing that you want to have, that it's just like, it's not even, it's a deal, but it's so big of a deal, it's almost forgotten about.
And I struggle on why people find with Star Wars that more female characters and people of color is social justiceism.
And it's a bad thing.
Because people say, they made Finn black just to have a black guy, or Rose is Asian just to appeal to the Asian demographic, or maybe, just maybe, they hired the actors they thought would be good for the roles, and they just happened to be black and Asian. Maybe? You think?
Just maybe.
And when they always say forced diversity and stuff. So what is the line between natural and forced diversity?
That's something I've never been able to understand.
Like, if a black guy shows up, suddenly it's forced diversity? What?
I mean, is it just? Okay. Here's my definition of forced diversity: tokenism.
Token Black from South Park.
Bingo. I think that's a good way to put it. Like, it's not that that's the kind of thing that it feels like, where it's just like a character there because he's X. Like, it's basically what I say.
But like in Clerks, the animated series, their friend Lando, who never did anything but just to be there to be the black guy.
Oh god. But yeah, I really do think that that's probably part of it right there. That's at least what I think. That there needs to be some perspective on this, and I think that that's just what's so distressing about this, is that so many of these people are just so angry that it's no longer. Pardon me for saying this, that it's no longer whites that are controlling everything, and people are afraid of that kind of change going away. And well, look what happened after we elected a black
Now,
president.
now we have MAGA.
With the red hats, as Bob Seska would say.
But
I know we've been all over the place yet again on this, but again, there's no one good way to talk about all of this.
it's frustrating being a Star Wars fan.
It absolutely is.
And that goes for multiple parties. Not just us, but you know, the people that do feel that they've been wronged somehow.
I mean, I still don't see it. I still don't see it like that myself. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I'm at the point now where it's just like, you know what? They can say whatever the hell that they want. I'm still in this fandom, and I'm still gonna enjoy it until I get tired of it. We've been a part of a fair share of toxic fandoms. Let's not mince words about this. There's some toxic fandoms out there.
Steven Universe, Rick and Morty,
Sonic
the Hedgehog, Transformers.
And you know what? We may as well say it here because there is some toxicity in there. Friendship is magic.
Yes, the Milo quote. One thing that I've been meaning to discuss is that, you know, we've been critical about all these people that are so critical of the new films and, you know, wishing for people to be fired and stuff. What does that say about us and stuff we've said about the DCEU?
That's an interesting thought. I don't think that we've ever gone to the lengths of some of those folks, because we've never sat here basically saying that Zack Snyder deserved to be fired from anything, or that at least myself personally, and I could be wrong on this, but I can't think of a time where I said that I think that the criticisms that we had, first off, we were always very open and upfront to basically say that we didn't blame the actors for those movies turning out the way that they did.
Right.
In fact, you know, again, let's be fair about when we talked about BVS, we had some praise for Ben Affleck. We had a little bit of praise for Henry Cavill, but he got completely wasted in that movie.
We had good praise for Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot is just a doll.
And she is absolutely killing it right now. No two ways about it.
Margot Robbie was about the only good thing in Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I and maybe the only guy that we could honestly say that said that we wanted him taken out was Jared Leto as the Joker. But I think that was also
and that wasn't anything against him.
It's
what they were doing with the character.
Exactly. And Jared Leto was a fine actor. He was going to land on his feet regardless anywhere else. Much the same way that I think that...
And now there's that report that he's getting his own Joker movie.
I'm not even going to comment on that right now. I really do think that when it comes to how we've criticized the DCEU, we've always looked at it as we have been the ones that have been talking about the legitimate storytelling problems, the decisions in making the films. Probably the best example that I can think of was Movie Bob's 3-part Really That Bad series on the whole thing, where he goes into so much detail over, like, he doesn't go after, like, yeah, he talks about Zack Snyder, but of course he also front-loaded it basically saying, look, by saying that he thought that Zack Snyder is a talented filmmaker.
So would you say that puts us sort of on the same ground as the people that hate the new Star Wars for valid storytelling reasons?
I would say that. I definitely think that we're not at the point where we're basically saying...
Would that put us on the same ground as people like world-class bullshitters and geeks and gamers?
I don't think so. I think folks like... You see some of the videos that world-class bullshitters put out, like them talking about, you know, toys not selling well, or the theory floated up that the reason Toys R Us is shutting down is because they had so much invested in Star Wars, completely ignoring the fact that that one section ignores like 90% of the rest of the space in any given Toys R Us back when it was sadly not being clearanced out. But I definitely think that I definitely think that there's an air of reasonableness, and I think that also goes back to when we watched The Last Airbender. As bad of a movie that was, I still don't think that we had that any kind of comments that we had towards Shyamalan in that was basically like, what's going on here? Why can't you put anything together anymore? You were so good at one point.
He was a one-hit wonder.
Some people would say a 3-hit wonder.
Sixth Sense, I'm assuming you're talking about Signs. What's the other?
Unbreakable.
Unbreakable.
I think a lot of people forget about Unbreakable because just everything else in his thing, at least up until The Split, was pretty much just garbage. But no, I do think that we're mature and at least sociable enough to be like, okay, this is why I have a problem with this. And we try our best not to really go after the people that make it or the people that do that, because in a lot of ways, as much as we want to have criticism towards Zack Snyder and David Goyer for this, how much of that of Batman v Superman was fucked up because of edicts coming from Warner Brothers? I mean, when you consider the fact that we're in 2018 and still the only big screen Robin in the last 30 years was Chris O'Donnell in the Schumacher films, I think that might have some. I think that kind of shows where the minds of these executives are more than anything else. At least that's what I think.
Now, one thing you gotta love is the tinfoil hats.
Oh God.
You know, the people that look at the critic review scores, and the high critic review scores, and say these people were obviously bought off by Disney.
Oh God. Seriously, folks, I can't just look at this and just be like
or they love the movie.
Like, is it really that difficult to fathom that maybe these people that are lucky enough to get by aren't getting a huge payday aren't getting paydays or bonuses from the Walt Disney Company if they don't say.
And then they always point about this recent instance where Disney barred the LA Times or whatever because they said something about them, blah blah blah. And so, like, you really think that's going to happen again?
Blacklists exist, and people get blacklisted for legitimately bad, for legitimately awful reasons. And
let me tell you this: it wasn't over a movie review.
And people get blacklisted from them for exceptionally petty reasons. Hello, Konami. I think that, that still sends a shiver down a lot of folks. I mean, that's that's also been about 3 years now where that whole thing happened. I mean, good God Almighty. How much time has gone by at this point? Still, I don't think it's unreasonable to look at where so many of these and what so many of these fans do and just not be willing to call them out. I mean, it's not beyond the pale to basically say, hey, you should be a little nicer. You should be a little bit better to people. I mean, is it really that much that we want to see the whole thing just completely devolve and just turn into another just awful insular fan base that doesn't want any kind of new folks in there? I mean,
it's a war. This is the war that I predicted 3 years ago. The only difference is that I didn't predict all this stuff about social justice and all that.
That was still kind of at the kind of bubbling about at that point. But
well, yeah.
Now it's boiled over.
People reacting over a black stormtrooper, to which John Boyega was like, "Get used to it."
Yeah,
and then they always make the excuse, well, I'm thrown back because the stormtroopers are supposed to be clones.
Yeah, that might have been the case during the Empire, but
No, before the Empire.
well, even then, it's just like whatever.
There was no implication in the original trilogy these guys were all clones.
Who knows? All right, it's at this point we're just spinning our wheels and just waiting for the next bit of Star Wars news to drop, and hopefully it's better news. All right, this franchise is in a position right now where it's not good, but it can get better, and I think it will get better. I definitely think that if Episode 9 doesn't release until Christmas of 2019, or hell, even if it releases next summer, you're basically still going to have that gap of a year between Star Wars movies for people to think, for people to anticipate, and for people to get excited about it, because we could be very well seeing the end of the Skywalker saga in Episode 9 coming up. And then from there, it's just like, well, where do you go with the franchise from here? Well, there's cartoons, TV shows, and other movies that they could do.
Rian Johnson's trilogy, whatever that's going to be.
There's the TV series that Jon Favreau is going to be an executive producer on. There's also, of course, what was the new cartoon show again?
Resistance.
Resistance, yeah, the Resistance, which is Dave Filoni going back to an anime-inspired animated series. Last time he did that, it actually kind of worked out pretty well. Let's remember. So, yeah, I still think that there's a lot this franchise has to offer, and I think that if we allow...
It's not a dead brand, no matter what some YouTuber tells you.
Anyone that wants to say that it's a dead brand, I don't know. Maybe they weren't big fans of the brand to begin with.
I'm sure they were. They're just a big fan of the brand from their day.
Well, you know what? Then you find yourself in a situation like in pro wrestling where where very few fans can get past the Attitude Era. Although with the work that the folks in Japan are doing right now, they're making a very strong push as the best company in the world at the moment. A little outside your purview, I know, but hey, I mean, let's just enjoy the ride here for this, folks. I definitely think that we're gonna.
It's a bumpy ride at the moment.
It's a bumpy ride, but you know what? I definitely think that we're approaching some smoother road here before too long. I really believe that. I think once you get more Star Wars content out there, and if it's good Star Wars content, you're not going to have a bunch of people throwing whatever shade they've got at it.
If it's bad Star Wars content?
If it's bad Star Wars content, we'll say it's bad Star Wars content. I don't think it's that difficult for us to say what bad Star Wars content is.
The holiday special.
Ow. No, but I think you're right about that. That's a good way to put it. I definitely think that's a good way to describe that, because we've seen the bad. We've seen the bad acting. We've seen
Mount Sorrow. From the Marvel Ewoks comics.
Okay, thank you. That one just went right over my head.
That's basically to Star Wars what the car wash of doom is to Transformers.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I'm also thinking I don't like sand.
I never got the whole beef with the whole I like sand thing, because first of all, he didn't say I hate sand. He didn't say that sand is just
I mean, the way that it's been taken.
And second of all, she mentioned sand first.
We used to lie out on the sand and let the sun dry us, and try to guess the names of the birds singing.
I don't like sand.
We used to lie out on the sand and let the sun dry us. We used to lie out on the sand. We used to lie out on the sand and let the sun dry us.
I don't like sand.
You know, that's a point to be made about
She
that.
mentioned sand first, and he was following up on it.
That's a good point to be made on that.
He didn't say it completely out of the blue.
I just think that at this point, guys, let's have some fun with this franchise again, especially once we start learning more about what kind of a show Resistance is going to be. There's nothing that says to me that, you know, I mean, come on, an entire show based upon about a fighter squadron, that has a lot of potential to be a ton of fun. So let's power through this rough. Let's power through these rough waters, and let's try to continue on to a smoother day. And I think that we're all capable of doing that. Yes, the slings and arrows at this moment feel insurmountable, but you know what? Those folks are the minority, regardless of what they think they are. The failure of Solo is not because of what they did. There were definite circumstances as to why Solo failed. The constant reshoots, the turmoil backstage, the release of the poor marketing, the release of it in a crowded period of time, you know, barely a month after one of the biggest releases of the summer, and 2 weeks after another pretty popular superhero property. And all that, of course...
Two popular superhero properties.
Well, one for Fox, one for Marvel.
Yeah.
Let's be reasonable there. And also the fact that you also only just got The Last Jedi out and done with just a few months ago. So you know what? There's a lot of influences as to why this box office wasn't nearly as high as the last one. But let's just take
the boycotters were just sort of like a dent in it.
If they had an effect, I think it was minimal. I don't think it would. They'll say that they'll take all the credit, but you know, if you know anything about business, you can definitely see all the circumstances around it, and you would say no. Mm-mm. You may have affected it. You didn't affect it nearly as much as you motherfuckers think you think you did.
So, do we wrap things up, or do we have anything else?
I think we've said a lot, and I don't know if I've got anything else to say other than let's just continue to like Star Wars, guys. I mean, Jedi Fallen Order was announced at E3. I'm hoping that the folks who made Titanfall get to make a really good game. Of course, that's also hoping that EA doesn't f*** it up with microtransaction bullshit.
Oh, EA. At least Battlefront is getting better.
Too little, too late, some would say.
Some would say, yeah.
And I don't blame anyone.
But, you know, there is a lot of anticipation for the new Clone Wars content that was just announced.
Call a spade. That's a good call on their part. So, kind of wish it was more folks from the Clone Wars, but take what you can get, I guess. Let's just have fun again, guys. Let's you know if you're thinking about whether or not your heart is really in this fandom, you know, why don't you go watch the Mortis trilogy again? Why don't you go play Rogue Squadron on N64?
Watch the original trilogy.
Read
the
comics.
trilogy.
Read the comics. Whatever era you want. Just remind yourself why you like this stuff so much, and let's try not to take crap like this, you know, as a certain red unicorn would say. Let's try not to take this stuff way too seriously.
And you know, once again, I gotta reiterate: if you don't like the new films for perfectly reasonable, critical opinions, I probably don't agree with you. I probably won't even like you. I don't know. I haven't met you. But you have a right to your opinion. But if you're wishing harm on others, if you're saying hurtful things to others, to people involved in the films, to people who like the films, shut the fuck up. Go to your room. And with that,
May the force be with you.